I don't like being here any more than you like having me here.
I love having you here.
Well, why don't you tell me why I stayed?
All right, you stayed at the ranch because you love me. Mother's in trouble, Nick. Come on.
You like him. You share the same self-destruction.
Maybe I'm as sick as he is. Think about your brother, man.
Nick, wait up.
You know, the sad thing, Troy, is you'll never feel freer or more yourself when it's 5 in the morning and the sun's about to rise and you're out of your mind.
I think we can be friends now.
I think you chose me.
The relationship between Nick and Troy on Fear the Walking Dead is deeply profound and intriguing, making the two characters' relationships one of the best across the whole Walking Dead franchise. It's a story of two black sheep, born different from others, figuring the world out around them. But to understand how the two characters work together, we must first get to know them individually. The story of Troy's childhood is a troubled one. He is the son of Jeremiah Otto, and growing up, Jeremiah was an alcoholic, and his mum was ashamed of him. Troy was a problem child, and would often get locked in the basement for days on end. Although Troy Otto is now a killing machine and a man who seems to bear very little emotion, Jeremiah recalls him as a child, just wanting to win the approval of his mum and dad. He is someone that lives in the shadow of his older and more charismatic and calculated half-brother, Jake Otto. Jake couldn't be any more different from Troy. However, despite their differences, Jake is one of the only people on the planet that Troy genuinely cares for. The two brothers' relationship is strenuous at best, however there is a mutual respect for one another, and Troy seems to accept the fact that Jake will one day inherit the Broke Jaw Ranch from his father. Troy has lived his whole life on the ranch with the 4 other founding families, meaning growing up, he must have been extremely lonely, and I believe this fed into why his character is so cold and isolated. Nick Clark grew up quite the opposite. Raised in the bustling city of Los Angeles, we know he was a popular kid, but he never felt quite at home in this world. He battled with a drug addiction which started to drive his family apart, and he struggled with the death of his biological father, as his dad passed away whilst Nick was in rehab. Not a lot is known about Nick's father, but according to Madison, Nick is very similar to him, as she stated his smile could light up a room, and his mood could bring it down. Although Nick has his struggles, he is still charismatic and well liked by his peers. The apocalypse is where we really start to see these characters come into their own. Although we don't see Troy from the first day of the outbreak, we do follow Nick as he encounters his former girlfriend Gloria as a walker in a church. This is what leads him to getting hit by a car whilst running away, and for a short while he convinces himself that he's going crazy. But after wising up to the imminent threat at hand, we see him start to shift into this survival mode which comes so much more natural to Nick than all the other characters at the time. And Strand notices Nick's potential when being held in a holding pen with him, and together they break out. After this moment, Nick just goes from strength to strength, proving how untouchable he is in the apocalypse early on. Nick is the first person we see in the show to figure out you can walk amongst the dead if you mask your scent, and we see him utilise this countless times. Nick is in many ways more built for this barren apocalyptic landscape than the world he lived in before. And like I mentioned before, we didn't see Troy from day one, however we do eventually meet him in season 3 and we learn he is also more suited for this world than the last. We are introduced to Troy testing the length of time it takes to turn, and this cold streak of killing innocent people to test his theory shows the psychopathic tendencies that Troy possesses. These are two characters that are truly at home in this new world. The two characters meet at the military base in season 3, and it is instantly a clash of personalities. Troy threatens Nick, but Nick isn't scared and he doesn't give in to Troy's ways, which takes him really off guard. Troy has never met someone who isn't fazed in the slightest by death like Nick, and this starts the hatred between the two characters. After Troy and Madison start spending more time together, Troy starts to associate Madison as the mother figure he never had, and this in turn leads to Nick and Troy spending more time together, as Nick volunteers to join the ranch's soldier department, which is led by Troy. This leads to Troy attempting to kill Nick, however it's Nick who gains the upper hand, and after sparing Troy's life he rips up all his precious notes. After this incident, Troy realises Nick and himself aren't so unalike. This is where we really start to see a shift in their relationship, as we go from Nick holding Troy at gunpoint for not giving his girlfriend Luciana medical attention, to the two of them going on scouting missions together, and the more the two characters learn about each other, the more they start to realise they are very similar. Troy starts to consider Nick a friend, this being the first time Troy's ever had a friend, and Nick starts to understand Troy and feels sorry for him, realising deep down he might just be longing for approval from the people around him. Nick sees the good in everyone, even Troy. Alicia said it best when she stated Nick shares the same self-destruction as Troy. These two characters have never fitted in and are both social outcasts, but they form this brotherhood within the apocalypse, which for me is a big reason why I love season 3 of Fear the Walking Dead. They each embody freedom and the apocalypse was made for them. One of my absolute favourite scenes from season 3 is at the trading post when Nick and Troy get high together. In this scene we truly see Troy scared for the first time, and in that moment he was more scared of Nick than himself, and you can see Troy has never met an individual like Nick before. And Nick hates that he loves Troy, but Troy is the embodiment of everything that Nick tries so hard to suppress. It is an unlikely friendship that is so beautiful to see, as they truly are the only ones who understand each other. After being outcast their whole lives, they finally feel accepted. Their friendship isn't your typical run-of-the-mill one. I love the way they go from trying to kill each other to killing other people to protect one another. As when Troy brings the horde of walkers to destroy the ranch, the only person he warns about this is Nick. And Nick hides this fact from the others in order to save Troy's life. And even after Nick admits to killing Troy's father in order to save the ranch, Troy understands Nick, and if anything, it brings them closer together. The compelling friendship between Nick and Troy is what makes seasons 1 to 3 so special to me, as they explore ideas that the main show didn't. Troy is a morally wrong character who in the main show would have either been killed off very quickly or become a villain. However, in this show, Troy is something else. He represents the brutality of the new world, but he also isn't portrayed as a villain, and that's largely down to his relationship with Nick. Troy is a character which you find yourself hating early on, but you come to root for him by the end, and this is what Dave Erickson did so amazingly in Fear the Walking Dead from seasons 1 to 3. The characters had so much life and complex personalities, and the dynamic between Troy and Nick is something I don't think we will ever see handled so well again in any Walking Dead show. But if you guys want to learn out why Dave Erickson got fired, you can check out the Nick Clark video on my channel, as that goes into it in much more detail. But thank you very much for watching, and I really hope you guys enjoyed. A massive thanks for all the support recently. It really means the world to me.